The Mazda CX-5 is not the best-selling Mazda of the last decade. It is the best-selling Mazda of all time. And so when it came time to refresh the vehicle, there's a lot of weight on Mazda's shoulders. And so today we're taking a look at both the 2026 and the 2024 Mazda CX-5. This is a second generation CX-5, and this is the all-new third generation. We're gonna be talking about the engine and drivetrain, the interior, as well as some performance testing. So let's get to it. So for the comparison, let's start off under the hood. This is the second generation. The blue in this video will be the second generation. The white is the third generation, if you didn't catch that. This is the 2.5 liter inline four. It is naturally aspirated. Now in this generation, you could get a turbo engine as well that would up the horsepower to around 250, but this is the naturally aspirated one, and this is 100% the engine that you want if you want longevity. If you plan on buying your CX-5 or Mazda 3, Mazda 6 when they still made it. Those vehicles, you want the naturally aspirated one. It's just a lot less problems, and so this is the engine of choice. Paired to it is a 6-speed automatic transmission, which I think does a fine enough job. For the 2026, they use the same 2.5 liter inline four. It is identical to the previous generation, and that's actually a very good thing because it's reliable. This 2.5 liter has been bulletproof over the last 10 to 15 years that they've been using it. And so I would trust this engine to go 200,000 to 300,000 miles at least, with regular maintenance, of course. So that is a very good thing. One downside, though, is that this is currently, for 2026, the only engine available here in the CX-5. So the previous generation, the blue generation in this video, did have a turbocharged option that upped the horsepower to about 250, 255. This is still stuck with the naturally aspirated 2.5 liter inline four, and there's currently no hybrid available. However, supposedly it's been teased that a hybrid is available down the line. Similarly, this is still paired to the same 6-speed automatic as the previous generation, so it's a very thorough, very worked through, very solid drivetrain. The interior of the second generation Mazda CX-5 is relatively reserved, and I've always praised the vehicle for that. I love how the climate controls are laid out, very linear, very easy to see and figure out. 2 big climate control vents and the screen up top here, which was updated in 2022. So if you get a previous year Mazda CX-5, it's gonna have a smaller screen that I nicknamed the red bubble system because it used red bubbles to select things. This is the bigger screen, which certainly is very nice and adds to the interior. We have 2 physical gauges and a digital screen in the center, where the new CX-5 is completely digital gauges. And so this is a lot more simplistic of an interior. However, there is one mortal sin of this interior, and that's the piano black around the shifter. It scratches if you look at it. If you blink, this panel will scratch. And so it is a huge, huge downside of this interior. But otherwise, the materials feel good enough, you know, for a mid-range SUV. I'm not going to complain too much. This is where you will see the biggest changes here for the 2026 in the interior. Now, a lot of the materials carry over. Something nice is that they actually got rid of the piano black here in the center. So this is now a matte piece of plastic. Doesn't scratch or cause fingerprints nearly as much. But the shifter's the same, the parking brake button's the same. We do get an updated steering wheel. It says Mazda on it spelled out instead of the Mazda badge. But the biggest thing physically and situationally is this screen. Everything is ran through the screen. The biggest downside is that the climate controls are now ran through the screen instead of the physical knobs. I think that this is personally a downgrade. However, I will say Mazda was kind of between a rock and a hard place when it came to updating this interior. If they don't do a big screen, then a lot of their competitors kind of exceed in that way. A lot of non-car enthusiasts like big screens in their cars. That's just the way that it is. I know I personally don't like big screens, but I know a lot of people do. So Mazda kind of had to put a big screen in it. However, when they did that, they also incorporated the climate controls. They didn't have to do that, and I think that is a huge downside. It's now all tap and screen, and sometimes it's laggy. For the most part, it's okay. but in the earlier models that I've tested, they did have a little bit of lag to them, which was a huge downside. I think the interior looks more premium than previous generations of CX-5, but I do think that that is a huge downside. However, one of the upsides of the new CX-5 is that it's a little bit longer than the outgoing generation, about 4.5 to 5 inches longer. And so, sitting behind the driver, I actually have quite a bit of space compared to this. As you could see in the previous generation CX-5, I am a little bit more cramped. Is it awful? No, but I get a lot of complaints. People who have families, especially getting car seats back here, isn't the greatest. And so that has been mended a little bit for the new generation of CX-5. All right, it is now time to put these two generations of CX-5 against each other for an acceleration test. Probably the most underwhelming because these are both naturally aspirated. These are the slowest versions of the CX-5 you can get, but we'll see if there's any little differences or things between the generations. Now, I have always praised the Mazda CX-5 for being one of the best driving vehicles in its class, and I've actually talked at least 3 people into buying these cars within the last year and a half. So I'm a big fan, definitely, of how they drive. I think that's a huge win for this vehicle. All right, so this is the new generation, the 2026 Mazda CX-5, and as I mentioned with the drivetrain, it's the exact same. And so I'm expecting these to be incredibly similar when it comes to our drag race that we're about to do here. But like I mentioned with the second generation, I have always adored how these vehicles have driven, and this new generation is no different. It still drives great, has great handling, and I would say handling that's better than RAV4, CR-V, Rogue, things like that. So, putting both in sport mode. Unfortunately for the previous generation, it did start to rain a little bit, so here we go. Go! Now, yeah, like I mentioned, whelming, I guess. It's not overwhelming or underwhelming. It's just kind of whelming. With the naturally aspirated engines, it's not thrilling. You know, it's not, chucking me back into my seat. It's not going to be a rocket ship, but I like the dynamics of the car. I like the way that they handle. I like the way that, the steering feels and all that stuff, and it carries over here to the new generation. So driving-wise, am I going to love the previous gen or love the new gen? They're really the same. I mean, really, truly, they're the same. And so if that's a high priority for you, it's kind of a net zero argument. So there you go. That's the word of the day. However, I will say, even in this previous generation or the new generation, I never felt like the naturally aspirated 2.5 liter really left anything on the table. I never felt like I needed more power. And you got to remember who's buying the CX-5. Sorry, I just got distracted. The house on the corner here had their garage open with a CX-5 in it. People who buy CX-5s are normally not buying them to carve up canyons. Although, when I was in Japan, Cork Sport actually had a display vehicle with a bunch of modifications that was pretty sick. People just want cars, and so I think it has enough power for that, if that makes sense. And so there you have it, the comparison between the previous generation and the all-new generation of Mazda CX-5. As I end all of my comparison videos, I want to know in the comments section of which vehicle you would personally take. I would still take the previous generation CX-5, just because I like the interior a little bit better and it's a very well-known vehicle. However, the new CX-5 potentially could get a hybrid system or upgrades over its next lifespan that might make it worth more than the previous gen. So we'll check in another few years if those improvements have been made for the CX-5. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.